Next on the docket, a tragic murder case out of Virginia. Two Virginia Tech students facing charges in connection with the death of a 13-year-old by the name of Nicole Lovell. Nicole, she vanished from her home last week and her remains found about 100 miles away in North Carolina. Natalie Keepers is now charged with being an accessory before the fact to the murder, disposal of a body, and also being an accessory after the fact. David Eisenhower, he's facing murder and abduction charges, and police suspect he contacted the victim on social media app called Kik, K-I-K. It is putting the spotlight on not just this, but apps like it and how they could be used in the carrying out of crimes. A young life cut short, an investigation concluding that 13-year-old Nicole Lovell used an app called Kik. So what do parents need to know? Well, experts say that some of these instant messaging apps can lead to threatening behavior, and law enforcement worry about potentially dangerous encounters.
I'm willing to say Kik is the devil for young children because it's like a free ability to text anything you want, and parents can't see the phone numbers that are coming in and out.
Experts say many of these anonymous apps are popular with teens as well as predators.
You can sign up as anybody you want to be. It really becomes a private hunting preserve for some of these pedophiles.
Here's how Kik works. Download the app for free, add any name and any photo. Then you can send messages, photos, and videos, and you don't even need texting service.
Parents sometimes take away these data plans thinking that, well, the child has abused it, but they only need a Wi-Fi signal to be able to communicate.
When the people who run Kik were reached out to, they issued the following statement. Kik cooperated with the FBI for their investigation. Kik cooperated with law enforcement to combat child predators anywhere in the world, either upon provision of a court order or in emergency situations such as this one. Now, some apps can sort users by geographic location, others by school, and some by age. So the question is, how do you keep your family safe?
The first thing parents need to do is set ground rules. Secondly, they need to know the technology and know how the parental controls work. And third, they need to talk to their kids. They need to have ongoing conversations about safety so that kid, when it comes time, makes that safe and smart decision.
And joining us now on our panel is Jim Koutsouras. Jim is criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Let's leave the criminality out of this. The court will deal with the two alleged perpetrators of this. Kik, okay? We've talked about this in different ways before, which is ethically, morally, there's a line that the four of us won't cross to make a buck, okay? Whether it's legal or not, you just don't do it. And for each of us out there, you at home, you'll know where your line is. To me, this app is designed to provide secrecy. It's targeted by both its marketing and everything else for young people, so that there's a disconnect to what the parents can see and the kids can see, in my vantage point. And it gives somebody on the other side of it the ability to identify by age, by gender, and by location. It's already by law enforcement been seen as a tool that pedophiles have been using. At what point, Jimmy, can I say, I don't know how the law works for this, but to say, wait a second, once bitten, twice shy. We know that this is a tool. And just to say that after law enforcement came to you that you cooperated, that's a lot different than putting in safeguards when you know, in the case of this app, that you have a dangerous tool that's being applied for nefarious purposes. At what point can the law intervene to say, well, time out, you don't get a get out of jail free card just because you say, it's not my job to check?
Facebook, Snapchat, Line, they're simply creating a mechanism that can be used legally that unfortunately is also being used illegally. How many times on the show, Richard, have we spoken about, even Apple and Google, who are encrypting all of this information that's being used for, terrorist purposes, and telling the government, we're encrypting it, we can't even see it, and even if we could see it, you can't come get it.
What if I make a brighter line? Because I'm gonna, and I know Romero will jump in terms of the civil liberties, and certainly in this one as well. And I'm not alleging criminality to Kik, except if a product is designed for a minor, in effect, that what is the core audience they're trying to attack? They're trying to attract kids. And the way the payment services work and everything else that's designed around it, it's for kids under 18. In this case, tragically, for a 13-year-old girl. You heard that mother say, that, you know, this is the devil's spawn or whatever she called it. If we're dealing with that class of population of children, which by law we know can't formulate their own judgment in many cases, does that change anything?
It doesn't, because they're not putting it out there and advertising it as such. Look, the other thing that Kik is used for apparently is for narcotics transactions, so, you know, by adults. Look, it's a problem that social media and the internet can be used for nefarious purposes as well as legitimate purposes. And as long as they're not advertising themselves, you know, in promoting any kind of illegal activity, they can't be held liable. You know, it's not like a gun manufacturer.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. And you know what? We've said on this show, it drives me crazy, Mayo, the one industry that gets blanket immunity or that gets blanket, liability in terms of just that they're clear of everything is the gun industry. Right. It doesn't matter if you're a manufacturer. Once you're Smith & Wesson or whoever it is, you sell it to a dealer, even if you know the dealer's shady, even if you know the dealer's involved with straw sales, you can say, it's not my problem what happens to the guns once I give it to the guy. We rail against that. Why shouldn't we rail also against a certain industry or a particular company and say, time out? If you're going to make a buck by selling advertising and all the rest, you should also have somebody that it's at least in place to be monitoring the chat rooms to make sure there's not illicit behavior going on or that people aren't being targeted that we know are children that are on this site.
We've spent a lot of time dealing with Kik, actually. Judge Arlene Gordon-Oliver of the Greenburgh Justice Court, Chief McNerney from the Greenburgh Police Department. We actually had Carl Berry come up. He's the #2 law enforcement officer from Jamaica, West Indies. He came and addressed the 50 chief justices of all of the states in the United States exactly about this and about child predators and about how to keep your children safe. The issue is not Kik. In fact, Kik actually, it could be argued, plays an important role because someone who doesn't have the money to pay for the text services can now communicate with their friends and family. The issue, which was stated as the third issue, is you have to talk to your kids. And as an adult, it's incumbent upon you to learn about this technology, but more importantly, have a good conversation with your children about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, how to be safe, what not to send. Don't befriend someone and assume that they are who they are because they come across on your cell phone screen. There is also a role for legislators. So perhaps for let's say, apps like Kik, maybe you ought to have to at least certify that you're 18 years old before you can engage in using it. But the reality is, people can always make up that age, and they do it all the time.
Yeah, there's
you
no
have
protection
to,
on
no
Kik.
protection whatsoever.
But if you put liability.
Yeah, well, the problem is that federal law already gives immunity to these websites, these applications, as long as the developers are passive, meaning as long as they say this is just a platform like a telephone carrier to help people communicate, connect, share information. The second that they get active and they start trying to police, regulate, monitor, they open themselves up to liability. So our
But you know what,
law
in my
is creating
business
a
though,
chilling
but in my
effect.
business, even if I have an open platform, if something happens on my platform, I'm accountable for it and I have exposure and liability as a consequence. So the very nature of me creating a platform that I'm going to profit of, why should I have that exposure? But somebody else says, hey, listen, I don't tell people what to say or do over there. I just create the platform, they say it, and they're on their
Yeah,
own.
because the digital law is undeveloped.
That's right.
And you brought up this idea of applying the consumer protection laws to this product, which is actually a great idea, but then you're talking about tort liability instead of criminal liability. Then you have to show that they knew there would be a substantial risk of harm. Then you have to create a chain of causation. To say that somebody goes on and is talking to someone else and all of a sudden a murder happens and there's direct causation, I mean, that's far-fetched. You have too many
But why
intervening
can't
factors.
I assume, as a parent, that to your point, that you have to create a formal account, that you have to do some tangible, if you're not going to monitor what goes on in there, and you're going to be a passive, basically, platform, you should at least insist on the front end some assurances beyond my pay grade that you know who you're dealing with,
Well,
even
here's-
if it doesn't require
But here's
payment.
the issue now. At some point, suppose that it does require that, and a kid fraudulently, like they do when if you want to go to a bar, you get a fake ID. Okay, so suppose the child certifies
it's something, Mayo.
certifies falsely that they are someone who they're not. Now, do you want that child brought to family court because they committed a crime? And then anything that can be done on Kik used to just be done on telephone. So you wouldn't hold AT&T liable
Except the
because
only
in
thing
The
is,
Godfather
on the-
someone made a phone
no,
call
but
before
the
the
difference
hit
is,
occurred.
this is, whether it's their fault or whatever, you've created a hunting ground for a population that can pre-select people by gender, age, location, all the rest. You couldn't do that by
you're
just calling up
doing that,
people
but
randomly.
he's right. So did AT&T. So did AT&T. When one guy called another guy, they planned a murder and they went and committed it. You've created that platform which enables people to do that. You've created a platform.
But you had to have certain information before with
Oh,
AT&T
Richard,
where you knew
Rich,
whose number,
Rich,
name, and all the rest.
A pedophile could have gone to a public phone and gotten the name of a kid and called that kid from that public phone and arranged for a meeting and so on and
Find a
so
public
forth.
phone
Not the
nowadays.
intended, Richard, it's not the intended use, and it brings me back to a burglary trial we did where they said that my client had burglar's tools. I said, well, what did he have? He had hammer. I said, well, where'd you get the hammer? What's the hammer used for? Detective says burglary, as if you go to Burglar Depot to get a hammer. That's not the intended use of a hammer. Intended use of a hammer is to nail things in, and if you can take it, certainly, and you can use it to harm someone. But if you look at what the intended use is, it's very difficult to say that the intended use of any of these things, whether it's Facebook, any of them, is for pedophiles. to
Amy,
do
though,
that.
the net result, though, is with the perpetuation of the status quo.
But Rich,
which-
let me
I mean,
ask you
how
something.
about not allowing anybody under 17 to use these apps? If you are a minor, you are still in your parents' household. You are under their control. They should have to. They should have to certify that you're able to use it.
Well, but your parents have to be able to enforce
Look,
that.
look,
And how-
Rich,
you know.
So let them verify with your parents.
It goes back to what Mayo said. Look, with every advancement in technology over the last century, you know, there's been a way for it to be abused. And it's not just have conversations with your kids. Look, like it or not, it has become so expansive. You've got to get involved. You've got to take the phone every night or every week. You have to look at it. You have to see what apps are there. You know, you have to go as far as policing your children who, as we all know, at such a tender age are very vulnerable and very impressionable. I mean, it requires involvement by parents that
I
they
know, but I can
otherwise
speak
didn't
for a
have
lot
to
of parents
in the
out there
past.
watching tonight. Before today, if I saw Kik on there, I wouldn't know what
You're
it
right.
is. And now it's incumbent on the parents to know what to look for,
right.
to then B, know how to police it. And I just have a big problem with people who create platforms, throw their hands up and claim passivity here, yet profit along the way.
And
there's
it's
a
worse
role-
than passivity, actually, because they encrypt the information so that they can't read it. So they can't help law enforcement. They can't share those text messages. So they're really washing
They're
their hands
intentionally
of it.
setting it up so they have no exposure. All right, coming up next, a local story. Should a school be able to make a kid take a breathalyzer test? NIAC debated that very question. We come back, the panel will debate potential legal issues attached.